All right, thank you. Thank you for that. Yeah. I'm of old school. I still rather see you than have you see me while I talk. You know, man, I'm so pleased you're here. I still need these dimmed, the ones that are my face. Can we do that? Not those lights. Nobody needs to see me that much. Yeah. Now, can we brighten them? No. Dull me, brighten them. You didn't know I did a comedy routine. I do that on the side. No. Something's going on here. I can speak from the back. Yeah, that's good. Now these. We're getting there. One more switch. All right, well, that's better. Okay, I can deal with that. You know, man, it's so important in our culture right now that we as men take a lead in trying to solve the confusion that's around. There is confusion. In the whole world, there's confusion right now. There doesn't need to be, but there is. It's important that all of us get in the habit of changing our place once in a while, like you did. You came up here this weekend, changing our pace to challenge our perspective. You see, when you change your place and you change your pace, you can change your perspective, or at least you can challenge it. Now, what happens is we get into these routines where we don't do that. But you need to. You need to go to the mountain once in a while. You need to go out in the woods once in a while and sit. You need to change up what you're doing so that you can be challenged by God and listen to Him in a different atmosphere than you're used to. So I hope you do that on a regular basis. And of course, the reason we have men's retreats, things that we do up here, is because we believe that. We believe that people need to get away from their norm and reconnect with one another. You know, this year coming up is going to be a record year for us in how many people come here. Because COVID destroyed relationships and people are so hungry to look at each other again. Just look at each other. Not just see each other through masks or see each other some other way, but to see each other and to talk to each other the way we were created to be. We long for human connection, we do. So I hope this weekend you can have that pace and it challenged and changed. And see, you and I have perspective, but God doesn't. God never had perspective. He sees everything the way it is. And so when I am growing and learning, it's because I don't know everything, and my perspective needs to be challenged, and I get to open the Word, and I get to look at it and say, ooh, that's true. Now, I don't need to understand it. And within our culture, we're struggling because we seem to want to understand things. You can see the verse up on the screen. It says, whoever trusts in his own mind is a fool. You say, wait a minute, that's pretty intimidating. I didn't say it. Talk to the one who said it. Whoever trusts in his own mind is a fool, but he who walks in wisdom will be delivered. In other words, wisdom is different than just saying, this is what I believe. Do you realize that what you believe doesn't necessarily constitute truth? It's just what you believe. See, believing something doesn't make anything true. So you can go through life and say, well, this is just what I believe. And whenever some young person tells me, I go, that's nice. It's probably wrong, though. Why? Because believing something isn't a criterion for truth. There are times we're so confused as a culture that we don't know anymore that we can look at somebody when they're doing something that doesn't make any sense at all and tell them it doesn't make any sense. We can't do that. But we should be able to. Some of the college kids I talk to all the time about, I talk to them about the importance of logic. Christianity is extremely logical. And when you dismiss logic, you've dismissed Christianity. It's not it's not illogical to believe in God. In fact, there's so many things. Let me give you an example. What is this? It's a cell phone. What's it for? Yeah, somebody made it, right? Somebody designed it, right? They made it. It has a purpose, right? This is a cell phone. It's not even the universe. And you know that about a cell phone. Same about a paper clip. The universe was not put into existence by itself. It's not an accident. And anyone who thinks it is, I believe, is a fool. Because you can't do that with a pencil. You can't say that a pencil got put together by accident. You can't say that you can't do that. It doesn't make any sense at all. In fact, if I came to you and I said, you know what I use this for? It's a hammer. Whoa. It's a good one too. Why are you laughing at me? I'm insulted. You should laugh at me. This isn't a hammer. And in our culture, we've lost the courage to tell somebody that it's foolish to believe your phone is a hammer. We've lost it. And we have children growing up in that environment. They're looking at things thinking, I am totally confused as to what to believe, what to know. And then we're wondering why the latest survey by Barna for young people 20 to 30 years old, the number one thing in their life is that they have no meaning. They don't know what they're here for. There's a high suicide rate. There's a high anxiety rate. There's a high depression rate. When I have young people come to me and they're telling me I'm depressed, I'm angry, I'm suicidal, I say, well, you don't know God, do you? Dave, quit making it so simple. It is simple. I'm sorry. If you're going to dismiss the way that you're made, if you're going to dismiss the way that you're created, and you're going to try and live another way, if any of you right now wanted to go live at the bottom of the lake, I would tell you it won't work. Not because I'm brilliant, but because there's some standard that you're made with. You can't live at the bottom of the lake. Well, you say, well, if I want to, you can't. See, I can clear that up for you real quickly. So why should you stay confused? Now, the problem is, if I do that, you might get insulted, or if I tell you can't use your phone for a hammer, now before you know it, I'm being canceled by somebody. I'm not trying to be an idiot. I'm trying to say that in life, it's not that difficult to understand that there is a God who created us, and he created us in a very peculiar way, in a very specific way. And if we're going to ignore it, we can't be okay. This isn't that hard to understand to me. I'm not even trying to be a person who's making people upset with me by the way I say it. I'm trying to figure out how I can say it and still be your friend. I was reading a guy that studied young people, and Don Matz is his name. He said this: the dreams of a great society have vanished. Our children have never heard of Woodstock, and for good reason. What did it accomplish? Abby Hoffman committed suicide. John Lennon, who imagined a utopian society free of man-made divisions, was shot to death. Jane Fonda has apologized to the Vietnam vets for her reaction in their war effort, and of all things, Hugh Hefner got married. In the light of present mentality, we might conclude that Archie Bunker was right all along, and that his son-in-law was a meathead. Sorry, I'm just reading what he said. It seems that there's little left to truly capture the imagination of this generation. The wrenching social concerns which challenged the youth of the 60s are but a memory. Present political issues are boring, while the exploration of outer space provides a new frontier Everyone knows there's nothing out there but emptiness. By turning in on themselves, they are confronted with the emptiness and meaninglessness of their own existence. It's interesting to talk to young people today who don't have any meaning. They can't figure out what they're here for. They're absorbing things from culture, trying to figure out what they're here for, and they can't find it. I don't know how many of you have ever read The Holy War by John Bunyan, but if you haven't, you should pick it up and read it. There's The Holy War is, John Bunyan wrote Pilgrim's Progress. If you've never read that, that's worth reading too. But The Holy War is a more obscure book a little bit. People don't read it quite as much. But John Bunyan wrote these while he was in prison, and they're just brilliant in their depiction of what's going on. And the truth of the matter is that you and I are in the middle of a spiritual war. And I'm telling you that what happens is that Satan knows when to attack. Satan's no fool. He's brilliant. And he knows when to attack. And he attacks people when they're vulnerable, when they're most vulnerable, when he has the best chance of winning. Confusion and deception are his great tools. On the other hand, God's tools are very simple. His tools are just simple truth. I don't know how many times I've solved a problem, things are going on in my life, and I go, oh, there is a God. Yes, there is. Okay, I got that. I'm not him. Nope. Okay. You know, this last year, many of you know my wife, and she was diagnosed with cancer, and we've been going through that. It's not what I feel that has brought us through that time. It's not my emotions. It's not the doctors. It's not the medicine. It's the truth that I know in God. Do you know, to my family and to us who know Jesus Christ as our Savior, death is not the end, it's an experience. That's all it is. All of us will face that, and if you're a believer, one day you have something happen to you where you experience this thing we call death. It's not a tragedy, it's an experience. And it's not because I'm strong, it's because I know the simple truth. The simple truth is the fact that God loves me. The simple truth is the fact that God has a plan. The simple truth is I'm not going to live forever. I know that. The simple truth is my wife, myself, one of us is going to probably die first. Unless we go together somehow or Christ returns. But most likely one of us will leave the other one for a while. We know that. We understand that. Those aren't things that I need to be confused about. The Holy War, John Bunyan, he talks about, if you haven't read it, he describes the battle that goes on for the town of Mansoul. And it's brilliant in every aspect. But he says this, I want to read just part of it to you, where he's describing one of the great tragedies that's going to take the town, one of the strategies, whatever the word is, of Satan. He said this, Diabolus, who's Satan, feared this man the most, Mr. Conscience, more than any that was left alive in the town of Mansoul, because, as I said, his words, like the rattling thunderclaps, would shake the whole town. Since the giant could not make him wholly his own, he studied all that he could do to corrupt the old gentleman and to stupefy his mind and harden his heart in ways of vanity. And he attempted, so he accomplished his design. He polluted the man, a little by little. He drew him into sin and wickedness, so at last he was debauched and defiled, and in the end was almost even past all consciousness of sin. And this was the farthest Diabolus could go. Then he thought of another project, and that was to persuade the men of the town that the recorder was insane. In other words, conscience was insane to have a conscience, to be bothered by something. And not to be listened to. And for this he was encouraged in his fits and said, if he himself, why does he not act this way always? But just as all mad folks have their fits, and with them raving language, so this old senile gentleman does as well. For you know, Diabolus convinces people that this Mr. Conscience isn't worth listening to. It's not worth listening to. How do we get there as a culture where we don't have a conscience anymore? How do we get to where we see that people are used rather than loved, and we're okay with it? How can we use people rather than love them and be okay with it? You see, the simple truth is that we were made to love God and to love each other. We weren't made to use God and use each other. But in the culture in which we live, in the world in which we live, using God and using each other is the norm. Why doesn't that bother us? In fact, we scheme, we try. Is that not working? Did it kick out? Would it work again if I connect? Sorry, I didn't even know it wasn't up there. Sorry. We're having internet problems. If you haven't figured that out, we're having light problems, internet problems. Satan hates what we do. Did I ever mention that? Okay, I can go without it. That'll be a distraction trying to get it set up again. So we'll just. Is it on? Of course. William Gurnall wrote a book that I just love to read, and if you've been around me much, you know I quote him all the time. He wrote a book called The Holy War, different than, called The Christian in Complete Armor. The Holy War was Bunyan. And The Christian in Complete Armor, he wrote this, and he's a Puritan who wrote this. Ephesians 6, 8 to 10, he wrote 1,300 pages on. Every page of this book is a stopper for me, every single one. This guy could outthink anybody I've ever seen. And it makes you see what this warfare is really about. So I'll often quote him. He said, he that knows not well what or whom he fights for may soon be persuaded to change his side or at least stand neuter. If you don't know what you're doing in life, you don't know that you're in a war, you don't even know what side you're on, you're not going to take a stand. So we have young people today growing up taking no stand whatsoever. They don't even know what they believe. I'm in contact with people all over the country, and as I talk to them, and as I hear the stories, here's one thing I'm finding in common. Kids that grow up in Christian homes are going to Christian colleges and coming away from that acting like they're not Christian anymore. That's normal. That's a normal thing that's going on right now. Why? What have we done? How have we confused anything to these young people? The scriptures make it very clear in Ephesians 6:10 that if we're going to be strong in something, we want to be strong in the Lord and the power of his might. But if we don't know we're at war, what does that matter? Let me tell you, this is just how things work in our brains. So I want to explain, as an old teacher and educator, here's how things happen, here's how you grow. The ideas don't just start. They start somewhere, you get them, they develop, and eventually your lifestyle reflects what developed. But how does that happen? It starts off very simple. There's hours of influence in all of our lives. People have cell phones, they have computers, they have whatever else, but they have hours and hours and hours and hours of input. This input that goes into their lives. Now, years ago, we didn't have this from the internet. We didn't have it from TV. We didn't have it. In fact, years ago, it was totally different. As families actually spent time together, as you spent time with people who are teaching you a trade or something else, or you're out, whatever it might be. But today, people spend hours and hours and hours being influenced by either social media, by television, by movies, by gaming, by whatever else it might be. But hours and hours and hours and hours. And if you think it doesn't affect you, you're wrong. Those hours of influence combine to give you a normal in life. So your normal in life, whatever it might be, is your normal because of the hours of influence in your life. So I grew up in a family with my mom and dad. And, I thought when I was growing up that everyone's family was like mine. Right, hours and hours of influence in that family. That was my normal. Young ladies, the survey is very clear. Young ladies that grow up in a home where they've been abused marry people who abuse them. Why? Normal. Hours of influence, this is what's normal. They don't know a different normal. See, so the hours of influence are very important because they create the normal. Then the normal creates the worldview. So whatever my normal is, I start viewing the world through it. The worldview sets up my values and my opinions. That comes from my worldview. And those two things hold up my actions. So we look at a world today where kids are walking in spring, especially into their schools, and pulling guns on people and shooting them. We're looking at a world where how many wars are going on right now? We're looking at a world where sexual exploitation, selling people for sex, is going on. We're looking at a world that doesn't make sense as far as loving one another anymore. That uses people rather than loves people. We're trying to figure out why. We're looking at a world where we keep seeing people talk about the importance of mental health, but we don't want to talk about the hours of influence that are going into their heads and changing that. See, the hours of influence matter so greatly that if I see someone who's doing, they're acting out, they're living, their actions are a certain way, I know that if I want to correct those actions, I don't do it by just telling them to correct the actions. I do it by correcting the hours of influence, and it will take time. That's why it is so critically important for us to understand that from the time a young person is born, that we watch those hours of influence that go into their head. I was so disturbed by our president this last week talking about a teacher who basically told the teacher of the year, whatever it was, that you are the parent, you're the only parent that child has when they're in school. And I'm sitting there going, wait a minute, I'm a teacher, I have my master's in education. That's a wrong concept. And people applauded it. And I'm sitting there going, wait a minute, stop this. This is not right. The public school system is not to be the main influencer on our children. It shouldn't be. And I, as a father, my kids are grown, but as a father, I'm the one responsible for what they learn. I'm the one that has to be responsible for those hours of influence. I can't pawn that off to the school. The hours of influence in our lives, they matter. And when you look at our culture right now and the problem we have with mental health right now, the problem we have, it's directly correlated to the hours of influence that people have absorbed pornography, violence, whatever else they've absorbed by the hours. And then we expect their actions to be different. After a while you get tired, you say this and someone says, hey, well, you must be legalistic or something. It's like, why? Because I'm concerned about what you're putting in your head? There are some video games that you shouldn't be involved in. I mean, I've walked in on kids playing video games and there's blood splattering all over the place. What are you doing? It's only a game, Dave. Stop the game. Your consciences are going to get seared here. What are you doing? It's not okay to shoot somebody and have their blood splatter all over the place. It's not okay to do this stuff and then believe that down the road you're going to be okay. You can't do it. The idea of us being separate from the world is getting harder and harder for us to understand. Sorry that keeps going out on you, so we'll just leave it. There is a way things are meant to be, though. There really is. One of the fun things I get to do, no matter who I talk to, 8-year-olds or college kids or whoever, is I just keep wanting to tell them, look, there's a way that you're meant to be. It's simple. There really is a way that it's meant to be. And once you live in the context of the way it's meant to be, you can actually enjoy life. And if you don't want to understand it, you can say, well, who says that you know the way? No, I'm not talking about overly crazy scientific things. I'm talking about simple things, like don't live underwater. Those things. If you have a phone, it's a phone that isn't a hammer kind of things. I'm not going to talk to you about things that don't matter, actually. There's probably a bunch of things. If Jason knew what he was talking about, he wouldn't be a Bear fan, that kind of stuff. I understand that. But we're not going to spend a whole lot of time there, though, because he can do that, and that's not good, bad, or ugly. It's just what it is. But when you look at what the Bible says, there's a way it's meant to be. For example, today in the world, we're being told things like, you can pick your own gender. I'm sorry, you can't. Talk to anybody who's logical, who's in medicine. I have a friend who teaches gynecology at the University of Illinois. He says, I asked him directly this. I said, so what happens when some guy calls himself a girl and he wants you to check him as a gynecologist? And he looked at me and says, I tell him to go to a psychologist. I said, how do you get away with that? He says, I must be old enough. He said, honestly, I can't treat them. They don't have the right genes. I can't do that. Somebody want to change their gender, they're asking to be put in medicine the rest of their lives. This is not right. I said, okay, well, where are the rest of the doctors saying this? I said, Dave, it's way too logical. And I look in the Bible at the beginning, what's really precious is that God, when you look at the beginning, God created, and he created man, and he created woman, and he created us different. That's what he did. Now he didn't create better or worse. He created different. He created women to be able to give birth. That's what he did. That's all. He didn't create me to give birth, and I'm awful glad. Personal commentary. But he didn't create us to do that. He created women to do that. I've often marveled at my wife's attachment to our children compared to mine. It's like this weird automatic attachment. Those kids grew inside of her. She fed them. I didn't. All my kids' life, they worked at attaching to me. They have it automatic with my wife. We're different. Men, you are important in kids' lives. You didn't give birth to them. You pay attention to them. It matters differently. Do you know that when we say that right now, as we've started new ministry for foster care and that kind of thing, and we do talk about the importance of men in kids' lives, that's all. We don't say anything negative about women, nothing. We just say, do you know that they go after us on that one and say, you got to stop that? Why? Men are different than women. I am not saying one's better. We're different. Look, the body principle, God teaches knees, toes, ankles, different. Good, different. Why do we have to be the same? Kids that come to the Nicolay Bible Institute, I love finding their differences. Some love to be welders, some love to be, maybe bankers someday, whatever they are, it's like different, good, go. Like God created us all so different. Enjoy the difference. What's better? Nothing. There's no better. Is your elbow better than your knee? Different. You actually, different clothes on those parts, different. We're okay being different. You look in the world today, it's like, don't insult. No, you don't have to be better than anybody else. You need to be who you are. What a freedom there is when you are who you are. I'll read you something I read today that bothered me very much. I'm a Wheaton College alumni, and Wheaton College, today I read an article by the Illinois Family Institute, and here it entitled "A More Dubious Decisions by Wheaton College" by Lori Higgins. She said this: it looks like, I don't even want to read it all. First of all, there's a bunch of words in here by people with their doctorate degrees that I can't pronounce. I truly believe you make life simple, not difficult. But here's what this teacher that they brought in special for Wheaton College to spend some time in the college said. On September 30th, 2020, CASA India organized a webinar on understanding gender diversity. Reverend Dr. J. Carta Lydia shared an introduction to understanding gender diversities, identities, non-binary genders. She explained there are 28 types of identity for gender other than binary identity. And this is at my alma mater, whose motto is for Christ and his kingdom. This is garbage. This should not be taught anywhere. It's not the way it is. There aren't that many genders. There's two. And God assigned them. Think of yourself as a child today growing up. And you're trying to figure out life. And you're listening to mom and dad. And then you're seeing there's 28 genders. You don't even know what you are. You don't even know what a gender is. And now you're trying to figure out what you're supposed to be. How about enjoying being a kid? How about enjoying being the way God made you? I know some of you are saying, I know that after I've spoken, people will come and say, how come you're not in jail? You'd really be in jail for saying what I'm saying? I'm saying that God made people the way they are. What makes that illogical or wrong anymore? I'm not trying to say it. I am totally disappointed because I'm a Wheaton College alumni. I can be disappointed in my alma mater. I can say I'm not pleased with this. They're supposed to be for Christ and his kingdom, not that. This is why kids are coming out of Christian colleges totally confused. There's a way it's meant to be, and I would suggest to you that God created male and female. You can go look in Genesis and see. Marriage, there's the way marriage is supposed to be. Marriage is between one man and one woman who are going to be committed to each other for life. That's God's plan. I'm not saying it always works that way, but that's the plan. Do you know that that's actually a very good plan? My wife, during her cancer recently, it's been some of the greatest months of our lives as we go through this. Some of the hardest. It's been an absolute privilege to be by her side and go through it. You know what marriage is really about? It's about commitment. It isn't about feelings. It isn't about having somebody meet my needs. God made it so that you and I could commit to another person for life. He calls me the bride of Christ. See, it says, would Satan love to mess up marriage? Sure he would. You mess up marriage, you mess up families, you confuse children. Before you know it, they don't know what commitment is anymore. You say, I don't know how you could say you're going to be committed. You know what? The plan is very simple. You and I are people who should be able to understand that relationships are critically important, and we're able to commit ourselves to them. There's not one human being that would say, yeah, I don't want a committed relationship. I just hope somebody's in and out and uses me, and that's not what you want. The idea of right and wrong today. There is a right and a wrong, you know. If you come to MBI, you'll find out as I teach classes there that I don't like you using the word good and bad because I don't know what those mean. In our culture, there's a push that says people that don't know God or are atheists can be good, and I think you don't even know what that means. Good is a very relative term, you know. It has to have something to compare it to. When Jesus was called good, he said, don't call me that. Why? Because that diminishes who he is. If I told you I was good at basketball, I'm comparing myself to some lady in a wheelchair at a nursing home. I'm really good. I'm not comparing myself to Giannis. For those of you who don't know, the Bucks, you know, they just beat the Bulls. I'm not trying to rub anything in. I'm just trying to give you context here. All right. But if I'm playing Giannis, I'm bad. If I'm playing the lady in the wheelchair, I'm good. The terms good and bad have no meaning. You got to be careful when you use them because you're really clouding issues. Not, you know what you do use? You use the word right or wrong, but we don't like using those. Because we think if somebody calls us wrong, they don't love us, but that's not true. You don't have to be right in everything to be loved by people. You can actually disagree with people and you can care for each other. Marriage shouldn't be confusing. Right and wrong shouldn't be. Community should not be confusing. What that means. Diversity shouldn't be confusing. You know, what's really cool to me is, again, the body principle. I love diversity in the body of Christ. Man, you got artists and, again, welders and doctors and lawyers and accountants and got all kinds of, man, put them together. Have them all listen to the brain. Pretty good stuff. Diversity is a good thing, not a bad thing. Independence isn't a good thing because each part needs to be subject to the brain so it works together. Diversity is only good in the context of all the diverse parts listening to one brain. Then it's good. If they start doing their own thing apart from the brain, it's not good anymore. Or shall we say right? So if my arm just starts going like this while I'm talking, you know, I've said this example so many times though, but when I talk to you, believe it or not, every part of my body goes with what I'm saying. My hands, my face, my eyes. And you know what? I'm not telling it to. It just does. It's like the brain sending signals, you know, go like this with your mouth, you know, or whatever. And it's like, you know, you're doing this. And it's like, whoa, how does that happen? Because they're all different parts. But they all work together. It's like, wow. When they don't work together, it's pretty distracting, isn't it? You know what I'm talking? It's not good. The kids growing up today are distracted. It's not good, not right. Sorry, because of this, I'm trying to figure out how I'm working this. One of the things that I think we get to the point is we realize that in this battle that we're in, it can be very simple, but it can't be about us. See, the simple part is I need to know that I'm in the middle of a war. I understand that. And that Satan can actually beat me. And since he can actually beat me, I need to know what I need to do in order to be a part of the victory. Now, in order to be part of the victory, really the only thing I really need to do is not fight Satan by myself. The only thing I really need to do to beat Satan is listen to God, because he can't beat God. Now, I'm telling you, that sounds like, Dave, we actually came up here to hear you say something that's simple. Yeah. Do you realize this, that if I actually listen to God, Satan can't touch me? If my goal in life is to listen to God and obey God, then Satan can never touch me. I mean, he can if God loves me like Job, but he can't win. You know, through my wife's cancer, I had a young person go and say, Dave, why you? And my answer to him was, why not us? We're in the same world you are. What, would God make sure we don't get touched by the same infirmities that everybody else has? God hasn't abandoned us. In fact, it's during this time that our faith is solidified. We can't win against this enemy in our own strength. There's no way to. If we're going to win, there's a couple things we have to do. And if we're going to train the next generation, there's a couple things we have to train them to do. And the first thing is we have to train them to recognize a problem. We know that in anywhere, in any time, any issue, if you don't recognize a problem, you're not going to do anything about it. Oh, and you know what the problem is? Me. I am the problem. So once we get that far, we can get healthy. It's not that if you think, boy, Dave, you're just beating yourself up when you say that. I'm really not. You know, one of the coolest things to understand is the fact that God, the creator and sustainer of the universe, loves me. And because of his love for me, gives me choice of what I do with my life. He wouldn't make me a robot, because that's a meaningless thing. So he gives me choice. So I get a choice. My choice then matters. What I do with my life, what I do with my time, that matters. And I can know God, and I am created to do two things in life. Two. I'm created to love God and love you men, love other people. That's what I'm created to do, those two things. That's it. He didn't give me a list of 12 things. Two. And you know, the very first thing, he defines it for us extremely well. To love God means I'm going to obey him. Notice he didn't say to love God means you're going to understand him. Because you can't. Spend the rest of your life trying to figure out how he created the world from nothing. Go ahead. You're not going to understand that one. In fact, the more you try and understand, the more confused you're going to be. But since he's God, what I get to do is I get to trust the fact that he's got a plan, that he made things. I would challenge all of you, you want a good time to just go out and read something, go read the book of Job, front that back. Job could be the oldest book in the Bible. Not the first, just maybe the oldest, maybe. What is Job attacked on? Satan, basically says, this guy, he's got everything. That's why he loves you. God says, that's not why he loves me. Take it away. Takes away his kids. Well, he's got his health. That's why he still loves you. Take it away. Satan was counting on Job, thinking, God is my sugar daddy in the sky. I use God. He does what I want him to. But the whole time I'm reading the book of Job, I'm thinking, Job, I wish you knew what was going on. It's not just about losing your kids. And I wish you knew what was going on. But here, Job, that wasn't his issue. Job wouldn't curse God. He seemed to know that, you know what he did? He knew who God was. It is so important for each of you men to realize you need to make the decision to know who God is. Not to understand who God is, but to know who he is. And once you know who he is, it will affect your understanding. But you need to know him. If you look at the motto of this place, it's to know Christ and to make him known. That's it. Known. We want to know him. Why? Because when you know him, you begin to obey him. You trust him. It's alarming to me when I talk to young people today. They don't know God. They don't know the Bible. They don't read. We need to know God. You need to spend time in God's Word. You need to read it for yourself. You need to know what he said. Once again, I think the most important thing that you can do in life, and I've done it the last 35 years, is read the Bible through at least once a year. If you read it at 5th grade level, by the way, you read 15 minutes a day aloud, you'll get it through it. This is not that hard. You need to know what the Bible says. You need to know God. The problem today is we don't recognize the problem. And the problem, I want the world to revolve around me. If I want to be a different gender, I want the world to agree with that. If I want to be a different whatever, I want the world to revolve around Dave. That's the problem. It doesn't. It revolves around God. I got to straighten that out. I have to live with that in mind. Lifestyle is really caught. It's not taught. Ephesians 4. Now this I say and testify to the Lord, 17, that you must no longer walk as Gentiles do in the futility of their minds. Don't walk like those who don't know God in the futility of their minds. That's not going to work. Why would you go and ask somebody who doesn't know the answer for the answer? As a teacher, that never made sense to me. What's the answer? I don't know. Go ask that guy. He doesn't know either. How many guys should I ask that don't know? I don't know. Ask them all. Take a survey and then take the worst answers. I don't know what to tell you. You'd be better off going to somebody who knows. Who knows God? Go to that person. You come to me and say, I need to know God. I'll say, do you have a Bible? Read it. I can help you, but I can't help you near like God can help you. So read your Bible. God made himself very knowable. If you want to know him, you will. So anyone in this room that doesn't know God is because you're not making the effort to know him. Once we recognize that that's a problem, we can do something about it. But in our culture, we don't like doing things about it. In many respects, we've lost the idea that there's patterns that take place. In the early years of a country, in any country, you can trace back why nations begin, and there's patterns. And you have to forgive me, but I'm an educational guy, so I like patterns. I like looking at them and saying, here's what happens. And in most countries, what happens is this. A nation starts, or a group of people start a community such as a nation through a spiritual faith that they have. They have a reason. This faith breeds courage. The courage in life. First of all, they started in bondage. If you look at the United States, they felt that, England they were in bondage to England. And the Christians came over, let's get away from them. Let's do it differently. The spiritual side of them bred courage, and that courage began to pay off in so many ways. In the workforce and everything else, there was abundance. And then when the land gets abundant, it becomes full of people who are self-centered. This self-centeredness goes to complacency, which goes to apathy, which eventually leads us back to dependency and bondage. And you see that circle that takes place in a country. It's a tough thing to watch as you watch a nation begin to decline. because people have ignored the idea that there's a God who loves them and there's a plan for them. After we admit the problem, the second thing I think that we have to do is apply the principle that success is actually caught, not taught. This is a harder one because what has happened, I believe, is that our school systems have evolved to the point where they don't teach anymore. By that I mean, you don't teach people best by lecture, you teach people best by example. And we have reduced education to lectures. The more degrees you have, the more lectures you can give, the more you think you're educating people. The truth is, educated people are those that actually have experiences in life first, and then they have a reason to listen to the education. It's how we used to do things. There used to be apprentices first. And then as you began, let's say welding, you began to do it and you began to fail and you began to work with somebody who knew how to weld. You would stop and they would talk to you and they would correct it, but you'd be willing to see what you need to do. You know, it's amazing to me as I grew up in a family where my dad started this camp back in '68, and we always, as a kid, the one thing I understood about my family is that we were going to be involved in service. That's what I understood. I didn't like it, but that's what we did. Our family did this. But my dad was with us. My dad was a pastor in Chicago, and he would come up here on a Friday night with a bunch of high school kids. We would pour cement in a floor. He would pour the cement with us. Wore the drug helmet and everything with us. Yeah, I know that's probably not the right term, but the handkerchief over your head, whatever it was. And we would do that, and he would be with us the whole time. Then he would drive us back late Saturday night, and he'd be in the pulpit on Sunday. We'd be right with him. Those guys learned how to serve. Those people are serving to this day. When I went to Wheaton College, my dad told me, sat me down before I went, and he said, Dave, I know you're playing football. I know you're playing hockey. I know you're serving God at camp on the weekends when you can go and in the summers. But don't you ever stop serving the Lord in the local church. Don't you ever stop. So why would I do that? Because I'm just warning you. You don't stop that. I never did. My wife and I finally last year stopped directing a club. We're 66 years old. The bottom line really was, you serve. You know, and now I watch my kids. You'll see a bunch of junior high kids up here this week working. My daughter's there bringing them up to work. My other daughter's in Milwaukee. Next week, I believe she'll be up here with a bunch of kids. They're still serving. You know what I learned in life? You don't tell people to serve, you go serve and take them with you. And while you serve, you talk to them. And when they sit down and want these kind of times, you already served with them and they'll listen to you. You know how rare it is for me to see a senior pastor here working with a bunch of high school kids? You say you're cutting down these pastors? I'm just telling you the truth. I don't see it. How do we teach the next generation to give and to serve and to be generous and to respect? How do we teach it? Are we waiting for someone to lecture them about it? Or do we go work with them and serve next to them and develop community in church that way? Do we serve with them and then sit around a fire at night exhausted and talk about things? Or do we talk while we work? The educational system today is weak because we have depended upon those who have tremendous academic abilities, but very limited interaction with the people. Any of you that want to go get a lecture, you can do that. And you could want that subject so you'll listen to it. It's the YouTube phenomenon. When I want to learn how to change something on my car, I go to YouTube. I figure it out, but I've already tried and broke something. It's a modern mentoring, I guess. I have no idea. But I think what we have to get in our head again is the thrill of saying, I want to be the person who sets the example, who serves with the next generation, who spends time with them, not sending them, not telling them it's important, but doing it with them. It makes a huge difference in their life because lifestyle is caught far more than taught. Ephesians 4:17 again, I testify, you must no longer walk as Gentiles do, in the futility